Hi, fifth graders. Today we're going to do lesson 6.5, the second part. We're going to add fractions. Adding fractions is very similar to subtracting fractions, and here's the steps that we need to do in order to solve. Number one, we need to find a common denominator. Remember, you can't add or subtract fractions without finding that common denominator. So the first thing we need to do is count by both denominators until we find one that they have in common. Hopefully it's the least common denominator. And then we're going to, step 2, make equivalent fractions with those common denominators. So what we're going to ask ourselves is, what did we multiply our denominators by to get that common denominator? And our saying is, whatever we do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. Step 3, just like you did for subtraction, we're going to add the numerators, and then we're going to leave the denominators the same. For addition, sometimes the numerator in your answer will be larger than the denominator. That's called an improper fraction. If there's an improper fraction, we need to change it to a mixed number, which means we need to divide the numerator by the denominator. We're going to use the phrase TIBO, and I'll explain what that is on the next page, to help us solve and change that improper fraction to a mixed number. The last step always is to make sure our fraction is put into simplest form. If we get an improper fraction, we need to change that to a mixed number by using what I said, TIBO, which means take the top number and put it on the inside, and then take the bottom number outside. So an example of this would be if we had the fraction 9/5. That's an improper fraction because the top is larger than the bottom. So to change that, we're going to divide that fraction. Now this fraction bar literally means to divide. So we're really going to divide 9 by 5. So the top number goes inside, the bottom number goes outside. So in order for students to remember how to change that improper fraction, we use the word TIBO. Now we divide like we normally do. 5 goes into 9 once. That's going to be our whole number, or the big number in the mixed number. We subtract and we get 4. 4 becomes our numerator. And what we divide by, or whatever started on the bottom, is going to stay on the bottom. So our answer from 9/5 becomes 1 4/5. That is called a mixed number because it's a mixture of whole numbers and fractions. So we're changing an improper fraction to an improper fraction, to a mixed number. Today's lesson will have a few examples of improper fractions as your answer, and you will have to then change it to a mixed number. We're going to start with the first question here. Aaliyah bought shell beads and glass beads to weave into designs into her baskets. She bought 1/4 pound of shell beads and 3/8 pound of glass beads. How many pounds of beads did she buy? So we need to take 1/4 and add it to 3/8. Now there's two ways to find your common denominator. The most common way that we've been working is to just simply count by 4 and count by 8 until you find a number that they have in common. Well, you don't have to count very far, because if I count by 4, 8, and I count by 8, I get 8. So the least common denominator of 4 and 8 is 8. So I'm going to take my 1/4 and my 3/8, and I'm going to change them to equivalent fractions that have 8 as the denominator. The step 2 to our problem then is to make equivalent fractions. So you have to ask yourself, what did I do to the bottom to get our new common denominator? Well, for 4, we take 4 times 2 to get 8. And whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So I'm going to take 1 times 2 and get 2. On our second fraction, 3/8, it already has the common denominator. So I'm going to leave that alone and leave it the same. Now, we need to add 2/8 and 3/8. 2/8 plus 3/8 equals 5/8. It is not an improper fraction, so we can skip that step and we'll look at, is it in simplest form? Well, the only numbers that go into 5 and also go into 8 that are the same is 1. So 5/8 is in simplest form. Now, if you struggle finding a common denominator by instead of counting them or listing your multiples, you can simply just multiply the two denominators together. So 1/4 and 3/8, we multiply 4 and 8 together and get 32. And that will allow us to have a common denominator that we know will work. Now, because it's not the least common denominator, we're going to have a little bit more work to do at the end when we simplify. So we're going to put 32 down, and we're going to change both fractions to 32. So we have to make equivalent fractions here. 4 times what gives me 32? That is 8. Whatever I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. So 1 times 8 equals 8. So 1/4 turns into 8 32nds. 8 times what gives me 32? That would be 4. Whatever I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. 3 times 4 equals 12. And now I can add the numerators. 8 plus 12 gives me 20 over the same denominator, 32. Now, once we get done, we need to check, is that in simplest form? Well, it's not, because 4 can go into both 20 and 32. So I'm going to divide both numbers by 4. 20 divided by 4 equals 5. 32 divided by 4 equals 8. And there is our fraction in simplest form. Let's go ahead and turn to the next page. We did this first question yesterday with subtraction. Now we're going to scroll to the bottom. We're looking at numbers 1 here. 5/12 plus 1/3. Remember, we want to stack these fractions. And then we're going to go ahead and add them. First step is always to find a common denominator. So we're counting by 12s and counting by 3s until we find something they have in common. Well, if I count by 3s, 3, 6, 9, 12, both fractions can turn into 12. Now remember, you can always multiply them together and get 36 and use 36 as the common denominator, but remember, it's a little bit more work. Since the top fraction is not going to change, I'm going to leave it alone. 3 multiplies by 4 to get that new common denominator, so I do the same to the top. 1 times 4 equals 4. Now we're going to add those fractions together. 5 plus 4 equals 9. Leave the denominator alone. And we get 9/12. We need to put 9/12 into simplest form. So we have to think, what can go into 9 that also can go into 12? Or what are factors of both of them? Remember, factors are the numbers we multiply together. So we can multiply 1 and 12. We can multiply 2 and 6, and 3 times 4. Put the commas in here. Then for 9, it's 1 times 9 and 3 times 3. We see that 3 is a factor of both numbers. Now, you don't have to make the list if you can do that in your head. We're going to divide both the numerator and the denominator by 3. And that's going to give us 3 over 4. 12 divided by 3 is 4. 9 divided by 3 is 3. The answer is 3/4. Number 2, 2/5 plus 3/7. We're going to count by 5s and count by 7s to find the common denominator. So if we count by 7s, we're thinking 7, 14, 21, 28, 35. That's the first time that 5 can go into both numbers with the 7 there, 35. Once we found our common denominator, we need to make equivalent fractions. So we're going to figure out 5 times what gives me 35, and that's 7. So I need to do 2 times 7, which is 14. Then we're going to do 7 times 5, and we're going to do 3 times 5, which is 15. Now that we have equivalent fractions, we add the numerators. 14 plus 15 is 29 over 35. And nothing goes into 29 or 35 except for 1. So it is in simplest form. Now, for the next one here, I'm going to change the problem up a little bit. So I want you to change it with me here. Instead of 1/6, I'm going to make this 5/6. And we're going to add 3/4 to that. So I'll keep the 3/4 the same, but we're going to change the problem up just a little bit. And the reason why, I want to show you an example there of an improper fraction. The book doesn't do a very good job of giving you examples of changing improper fractions into mixed numbers until you get to your homework. So we're going to practice a few of these before you get to your homework and have to do it there. 5/6 plus 3/4. Again, we need to come up with a common denominator. You can use 24 by taking 6 times 4, or a little bit smaller would be 12. Both can turn into 12s. So we're going to go 6 times 2 to get there. And so I have to do 5 times 2. Whatever I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. Remember, when we're multiplying the top and the bottom by the same thing, that's just like multiplying by a fraction of 2 over 2. 5 times 2 equals 10. I'm going to do the same thing here. 4 times 3 to get 12. So I do 3 times 3, which is 9. Now I'll add these two fractions together. 10 plus 9 gives me 19. The denominator stays the same, and I get 19/12. Now, this is where the fraction is improper, where the top is larger than the bottom. When that happens, we need to use TIBO, which just means divide the fraction and put the top number on the inside, top inside, bottom outside. The 12 goes outside. Now we divide it. 12 goes into 19 only once. Then I can subtract. 19 minus 12 is 7. The 7 becomes the numerator, and what started on the bottom, or what we divided by, stays here on the bottom. And our answer is 1 7/12. So that is how you turn an improper fraction into a mixed number. On to the next page. I changed a few problems as well here on the next page so that we can get some improper fractions as well. On number 7, we have 1/3 plus 4/18. If you need some more room, you can do these problems on a separate sheet of paper and then transfer it back to the book. 1/3 plus 4/18. We're counting by 3s and we're counting by 18s. And we come up with a common denominator of 18. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and 18. So 18 is our common denominator. The second step is to figure out, what do I multiply by to get that 18? Well, I do 3 times 6 to get 18, so I must do the same to the top. Whatever you do to the bottom, you got to do to the top. 1 times 6 equals 6. Since 18 was already the denominator of the second fraction, we leave the numerator alone, and then we add them up. 6 plus 4 equals 10 over 18. That denominator stays the same. Before I can say I'm done, I have to check to see if it's in simplest form. Can you think of a number that goes into both 10 and also goes into 18? So what number can multiply to give you 10 and also can multiply to give you 18? Because that's what we're going to divide it by. 2 goes into both 10 and 18 because 10 and 18 are both even. It will always go into it. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 18 divided by 2 is 9. And nothing goes into 5 or 9 except 1. So that is in simplest form. Question number 8 here. I changed the problem to 4/5 plus 1/3. So we still have the same denominators. I just added 1 to the 3/5 there and made it 4/5. 4/5 and 1/3. Find a common denominator. So if we're counting by 5s and counting by 3s, the first number that they would both have in their list is 15. So I make equivalent fraction by saying 5 times what gives me 15? That's 3. Whatever I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. 4 times 3 equals 12. 3 times 5 is 15, so I do 1 times 5, which is 5. Once I have my equivalent fractions, I can add the numerators. 12 plus 5 is 17 over 15. My denominator stays the same. The top number is bigger than the bottom number, so we need to divide it. We're using TIBO. So we go top number inside, bottom number outside. And 15 goes into 17 once. Let me go ahead and change colors so it shows up a little bit better. We got 1. And when I subtract, I get 2. That 2 goes on top. So this is 2. And what started on the bottom, or what we divided by, stays here. So our final answer should be 1 and 2/15. And that is also equivalent to 17/15. Those two are equal to each other. Now, I want you to do number 9 and number 10, and I changed number 10 to 5/9. But I want you to take 3/10 plus 1/6, find a common denominator, and then add those together. And then over here, we're going to take that 5/9 plus the 1/2, find a common denominator, And then when you get done, this one, you will have to T-bow. So go ahead and press pause on these two fractions, solve them, and then press play when you're ready to reveal the answers. All right, 3/10 and 1/6. If you counted by tens and counted by sixes, 30 would be your least common denominator. Now, some of you may have used 60, and that will change it towards the end, but I'll show you what you might have gotten. If you changed them to 30, you should have gotten 9 over 30 and 5 over 30. When you add those together, you should get 14 over 30, which then you have to think, what can go into 14 that also goes into 30, so that you can put it into simplest form. 2 goes into both numbers and gives us an answer of 7/15. Now, had you used 60, you might have gotten 28 over 60, which if you divided that by 4 or divided it by 2 and then 2 again, you would still get to 7/15. You could have divided it by 2 and then 2 again. For the 5/9 and 1/2, you needed to change to a common denominator of 18. That gave us 10/18 plus 9/18. Add those together, we get 19/18, which is improper. The top is bigger than the bottom. You divide 19 by 18, top inside, bottom outside, and you get 1, which is the whole number. It goes in one time. 19 minus 18 is 1. That 1 goes on top. And then because 18 was our denominator, it stays our denominator, and it's 1 and 1/18. Tonight for homework, you're going to do the addition problems that you skipped last night, which is number 3, number 4, 8, 9, 10, and 11. You can skip number 12. Then on the back, you are doing 1, 3, and number 5. For estimating here, all we want to do is just round it to the nearest 10 cents. So 34 cents is probably closest to 30 cents. And then 22 cents for the eraser. Think about what that would round to. And then 98 cents would round to how much money. If they bought all of that and you added it up, about how much money would that be? So that would be your estimate. So round 22 cents to the closest 10, round 98 cents to the closest 10 cents or to the next dollar there, and then add it up. That ends today's lesson, guys. Great work. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Have a good day.